Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is part of our continuous coverage of the US elections. We are going to be bringing you minute-by-minute updates of the results which are coming in. I'm Shivan Chandna.
Absolutely. Polling has been underway in the United States for the presidential race 2024. Early results have started to pour in. Minute-by-minute changes are coming. And results of some of the swing states and some of the states, not the swing states yet, has started to pour in just as we speak. And we'll, of course, bring you the latest updates on all of that on the show.
Both camps wait with bated breath for the 2024 mandate and to see who grabs that magic figure of 270. It is the race to 270 with immigration, abortion, economy. These are the three topics which are going to be top of the agenda, which are primary for the American voter. And of course, a popular vote isn't enough. It is going to be down to the swing states. We will be bringing you all the updates right here.
All right, let's get right into it. Early leads and results have begun pouring in the United States presidential election. Polls have closed in many states and they're beginning to close in the election.
And while voters are choosing whether Donald Trump or Kamala Harris will win the historic presidential race, Donald Trump and Harris have both opened their account in this action-packed presidential race. Donald Trump has won the election in Florida and 9 other states. So the wins have obviously started coming in. On the other hand, Harris has taken Washington, D.C. and 8 states, including Maryland, Massachusetts, Vermont, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and the U.S. Capitol. All Democratic strongholds, as expected. So far, that gives Harris 71 electoral votes, and Trump stands a leap ahead at 101, but that's the figure so far. North Carolina, which is a crucial battleground in this year's election, is seeing a seesaw battle between both candidates.
At present, Trump is leading in the state as well. So that's what we're seeing right now. These are the early trends, of course, that are coming in. We'll, of course, bring you all the wins and the leads for the results as they start pouring in. And now for more on this, we are being joined by Jonathan Wachtel live from New York City. He is Director of Communications and Senior Policy Advisor at the U.S. Mission to the United Nations, a Global Affairs Analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, sir, this morning.
A pleasure being here.
Now, you have been a global affairs analyst. We are seeing the results that have started to pour in. Of course, it's all down to the policy issues at this point. It's a battle between what the people are choosing. Is it the economy? Is it issues of immigration? Just to begin with and get a sense of where we are at right now, what's your assessment of both the candidates' stance and positions?
You know, it's early, obviously, in terms of monitoring this. The polls are closed now. They just closed on the East Coast, so we're going to start to get some additional state numbers flowing in now. You know, at this stage, having watched these elections since I was a young boy sitting on dad's or mom's lap, you know, it really can be a nail-biting experience with the electoral vote process. It's one thing when you have the popular vote, you're looking at the tally, you see what's going on. This thing, it becomes this almost strange surprise type of thing that happens, especially with the swing states. So it's going to be a very long night here, certainly, and for you, a long day watching this unfold over the next few hours.
Mr. Wachtel, you know, in any election, in any part of the world, there are always those voters who are more vocal with who they want to go with. And then there are those voters who are not very vocal, but they are very determined in their stance. They are clear. At this point, given the red and the blue wave, or whatever part of the wave that we can see at this point, how much do you feel this red that we are seeing as per the opinion polls is a mirage, or how much do you feel it is actually genuine? Is Trump really leading as well as some polls are suggesting?
You know, it's a very good question. I think the state to watch right now is Pennsylvania. And right now, it's leaning a little bit towards Kamala Harris. That is the state that, you know, I will eat crow if I'm wrong here, of course, but that's the state that's going to be in the headlines. And the other ones, the other swing states are beginning to shape up in ways that were somewhat predicted. Of course, there's Arizona and a couple other more Western time zone states that we have to watch the outcome with. But it is Pennsylvania that is going to be really such a decisive thing in our form of presidential elections in this electoral college.
Right, and also just to let our viewers know that what you see on the screens, these are the leads and the wins. Of course, the absolute wins also, we will be bringing you those results. And another development, Kamala Harris has won in New York, sir. That is the big result that is coming in. What do you have to say about that?
Well, it's not particularly surprising. You know, New York is predominantly Democratic in terms of allegiance. Of course, you have parts of New York that are pretty conservative, the state itself. But, you know, New York City, as the biggest city in the United States, of course, will lean Democratic. That said, you know, in previous elections, you would see a much more resounding win in New York State. And, you know, the irony of all this, of course, is that Donald Trump himself is a New York City native from Queens, New York. Originally, that's where his dad made all his money in real estate, and then he inherited the Trump empire. And this is where he made his name. And of course, you know, we all know he then took up residence in Florida, and that has been his mainstay.
Mr. Wachtel, again, I'm just repeating this for our viewers. This is the race to 270 at this point. Donald Trump is at 120. Kamala Harris at 99. New York is the latest result that we've just got, which Haim just mentioned, where, of course, there have been no surprises there. Sir, you are a global analyst. I wanted to understand the global perspective here of both the candidates, given the way Trump's term was in the 4 years preceding Biden, and given the 4 years of Biden and the Democratic camp, you know, we've seen a drastic shift in the tensions that we've seen erupting in different parts of the world. Those 4 years in Trump's reign, and this is Trump really wears on his shoulder that there were no wars. And I need not reiterate where conditions stand at this point, whether it's West Asia, whether it's Europe, or whether it's East Asia, whether it's South China Sea and regions, of course, several other parts of the world. Do you feel Trump at this point coming in is better for the global scale?
That's a really, really good question. And it really depends on which country's looking at this. From India's perspective, and certainly what's going to happen here tonight is going to affect India. It's inevitable just because the United States is the largest economy in the world, massive trading partner with India, and obviously two democratically foundation countries. You know, you have the biggest democracy in the world. We have one that's a quarter of the size of yours, maybe a little bit over a quarter of the size, but still massively influential. And of course, our military and all the other things going on in the geopolitics. Now, Trump has a fairly good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. Kamala Harris, you know, has of course met him and engaged with him, but there is a deep track record with Modi, certainly. So, you know, how, and actually a level of respect for Modi, certainly, that we noticed in following the interactions that the two men had. How that bears in terms of what is going on in these theaters of war in Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East, as you mentioned. This will certainly impact all that. And of course, India has its own geopolitical interests in these conflicts and the outcome of these conflicts.
Right. Mr. Wachtel, just stay on with us. We're also now being joined live by our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, for joining us from New York. Susan, the latest is that the Democrats have won. Kamala Harris has won in New York. What can you tell us, Susan?
Yeah, not surprising, as our guest mentioned, New York has traditionally voted blue. The last time that Republicans were able to flip New York was with Ronald Reagan, the former president. So it's been quite a while, decades, in fact. What was interesting that the former president did spend some time here in New York, maybe more than other Republicans, not only his Madison Square Garden rally, but also, you know, he talked to bodega workers. He went to the Bronx, had a rally there. I think what he was trying to do was sort of close the gap. I think most Republicans knew that they wouldn't be able to flip New York, but we'll have to wait and see, you know, how ultimately New York voted. And at least in the popular vote, was he able to close that gap, notably among black men and minorities? Appears that that's what a lot of people are looking at to see how people are voting in that sense.
Susan, the undecided voters have definitely been a topic of discussion here. 20% has been attributed to people who still remain undecided, or perhaps have not vocalized who they would want to, even though they've made up their mind. This is something I had taken up with Mr. Wachtel earlier. How much do you feel that is going to be a deciding factor going forward for the numbers which are left?
Yeah, independents, undecided voters, they're very important. And notably because, first of all, they don't really take that part in these polls as much as perhaps based Republicans and Democrats do. And on the other hand, just because the margins are so close, it's such a tight race that every single vote counts. I will say with the undecided voters, it'll be interesting to see which way they lean, because the ones that I talked to, many thought that neither candidate really represented what they were looking for. And these were people that were younger, and they were possibly even first-time voters, and they sort of just wanted to see a break from the two-party system. They didn't feel like they were relating to any of the candidates, and then the issues that were important to them, they felt that it wasn't being represented properly. A lot of it with the younger generation had to do with the war in Gaza, an outlier, a foreign policy issue that perhaps wasn't that much important in previous elections. And then you had the issue of housing, cost of housing, and also climate change and just up more mobility in general.
Mr. Wachtel, coming back to you now, of course, let's talk about the blue wall states now as we know them, which that's Wisconsin, Michigan and Pennsylvania. From what we do know right now, as per the numbers, Harris has a lead in 2 of these 3 blue wall states, that's Michigan and Pennsylvania. Let's talk about, I wanted to come back to the point that you were making earlier on foreign policy issues and just tie that into some of the biggest agendas on the ballot this time. Michigan, as you know, it's home to the largest Arab American population, especially Detroit and Wayne County. Wayne is, in fact, it also played a big role for Biden's win in 2020, where he won in Michigan with a 2.78-point margin. It's a blue wall state with 15 electoral votes. When it comes to appeasing Arab American population, what is your stance on how Kamala Harris has performed and how Trump has performed so far? We also saw that in Pennsylvania, that's where they spent the most time, having about 16 events in the last 2 weeks alone. So what's your assessment at this point?
I believe you're asking me this question, yes?
Yes.
So certainly the Arab vote, about 250,000 in Michigan, is of course what we are probably seeing play out in large part. It's also home to very large universities, Michigan State, etc. So you would have that Gen Z impact playing into this, of course, as well. In terms of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia is a massive city, and in terms of the rest of the state, and then you've got Pittsburgh. But it's those urban settings that tend to lean Democrat. So it is not surprising that we're seeing a lead happening here. But it is early to call this state. And as you'll recall, I mentioned Pennsylvania as the state to watch. It really is the state to watch. And we're going to have to just watch where these numbers go. The early voting, which was tallied, of course, ahead of the rest of this coming in now, is also having a factor on that. Democrats tend to vote earlier, and Republicans tend to show up at the polls on Election Day or just before Election Day these days as the electoral process has changed. So,
Mr. Walker,
I would not be surprised.
Yeah,
excuse me. I would not.
Yes.
If we saw the Pennsylvania tally be even a contested thing, even if it appears that Kamala Harris taken, I would expect it to be contested just because it is so crucial for the Electoral College tally.
Mr. Wachtel, for our viewers, it was a few months ago that there was an assassination bid attempt on Donald Trump, and that happened in Pennsylvania. At that point, the instant sentiment around the world was that, okay, this might just get Trump to the White House because sentiments are going to be totally behind him. People will be, rooting for him after that. And there was a sudden wave that he had flowing. But at this point, when we see Pennsylvania, at least the trends that are coming in, we see that, no, Kamala Harris still is leading by a good wide margin. Does that say anything about about, what voters are essentially going for? Because it doesn't matter what kind of events have taken place. The voter has already decided where they will go. They're not going to get swayed, whether it's a swing state or anyone else. It's just, we'll have to wait and watch what happens. Do you feel the voters are already decided?
It's interesting you asked that question, because when that assassination attempt happened, even I was one of these people observing it and saying, wow, this is going to give Trump a good bump. The problem for Trump on that is, not that you want something like that to happen closer to the actual election day, but I think that was far enough out from the election day that there was enough time for Kamala Harris to make headway in the state, and certainly the settling down of emotions and scrutiny at the records of the candidates and what they stand for and where the country's going. So I think what we're seeing now is indeed a reflection of true sentiment now.
All right. Well, Susan, I'm going to come to you now. I could see that perhaps you wanted to add something to what Shivan was saying. Of course, we do know that Pennsylvania really bridges the gap to the White House. We know that it has 19 electoral college votes. Shivan has mentioned this. This is where the assassination attempt happened. And months later, we saw a comeback of Donald Trump where he was serving French fries at a McDonald's. So it's seen a lot of action. Pennsylvania particularly has seen a lot of action. Also important to mention that 10 of the last 12 White House winners have been correctly picked by the Pennsylvanians. And no Democrat has won the White House without Pennsylvania since at least 1948. So what do you have to say about that, Susan?
Yeah, Donald Trump was successful in flipping Pennsylvania in 2016, and then you're right, it just consistently votes blue. I do want to say that right now the numbers that are coming in, Pennsylvania is really a patchwork of rural and urban areas. The rural areas you go, they're very loyal Trump supporters, and then, even Butler, Pennsylvania, where he was almost assassinated. And then you have places like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia where they just generally lean blue. And so, we have to wait and see as each county counts its votes how much Pennsylvania is leaning red or blue, because of the fact that a lot of the counties that are red, they just haven't been started counting their ballots as of now, and Pennsylvania could actually take a very long time. We might not even know how Pennsylvania sways by the end of tonight or even tomorrow. It just takes a long time. So it is a crucial vote, but I think we should be cautious. For Democrats, cautiously optimistic. For Republicans, cautious into really thinking that Pennsylvania has made up its mind and in leaning blue, just because all of the votes haven't been counted and there are so many red patchwork sort of counties scattered around Pennsylvania as well.
All right, let's just get our viewers the sense of where things stand at the moment. Yeah,
it's the race to 270, and as of now, the trends, of course, the predictions are showing that Trump is at 257. And the Democrats at 166. Again, these are predictions, these are trends that we're tracking.
But these also include the leads and the wins. Yes. If you were to talk about the electoral votes, Trump currently is at 177, Harris is at 99. And if we talk about the wins, it is a win for the Republicans in North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, as of now, Nebraska. That's a win for the Republicans as well. Oklahoma, then we have Texas. We have Louisiana, we have Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and South Carolina. Of course, Kentucky, Indiana, and all of these states. What we see as per the leads right now, when we talk about the blue wall states, it's currently the Republicans which are leading in Wisconsin. And of course, as I mentioned, in 2 of those 3 blue wall states, it's Kamala Harris who's taking the lead at the moment. Of course, the results are yet to be cleared going forward.
Mr. Boxell, I just wanted to come to you next. Of course, the security situation, the National Guard had been mobilized in several states. 15 was the last number we got. At this point, is there any hint of any kind of, security personnel and authorities must be on high alert? Where does the security situation stand at this point? Because we remember what happened on 6th of January 2021. Any such thing which is being anticipated? Preparations are already in place, though.
Preparations certainly are in place, and there's a lot of security, law enforcement. There have been a few bomb threats. none that were of such a nature that it was imminent, hoax type things. It just happens. And having been a guy who's been in many countries where there are elections happening, honestly, so far, and let's hope this is a peaceful night. It looks like this will be a decision that will go about without that type of craziness that sometimes will erupt in certain countries. The real question is what happens after tonight, really, because then you're going to have a lot of passion and emotion attached to any contested state, especially these swing states. If the decision of the Electoral College is left open to that type of contest, that could cause some sort of violence, that type of thing. So we'll have to look out for that.
Yes, this is exactly what I wanted to come to next. You said what happens next is going to be very, very interesting. And I wanted to take a little further from there. When you say what comes next, I'm talking about the next 4 years. When you have a presidential race, which is so neck to neck till the last moment, what do you feel the presidency will look like, regardless of who comes to power? And Susan, I'll come to you also for your thoughts on that. Mr. Wachtell first.
Yeah, so ideally a president has the wind behind him or her. In this case, we might have the first woman president as a result of tonight's vote. But, you want the president to at least have the endorsement of the majority of Americans so that indeed they are representing the aspirations of the American people. Of course, we're looking at a situation now in which things are so divisive. Anybody who steps into the White House and is pushing forward policy is going to have nearly half, if not more than half, because of the electoral vote process, not particularly thrilled about them being in the White House. So it'll make the going difficult. Plus, we haven't even this evening touched on what the makeup is going to be of Congress. You're going to have the Senate and the House of Representatives, and those are separate power centers within the American system, and they have sway voting. All these separate powers have to be taken into consideration. If we end up with, a single party in charge of, of Congress and the executive office, it certainly will make the going much more fluid for whoever's sitting in the White House. Yeah. It's unpredictable at this point.
Mr. Wachtell, thank you so much for your time and joining in. We are going to slip into a short break. I'm sorry, Susan, I kept you waiting. I'll come back to you, but we'll need to take this break at this point.